whatever you are.
We will call the meeting to order. Laura Lee, can you call the roll?
Sure. Stu Boyd. Denise Chapman.
Here.
Lori Goebel.
Here.
Dawn Cook.
Here.
Alexandra Lessem.
Here.
Nancy Rumpfelt. Mike Schultz.
And then Denise, will you please lead us in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Item number 2 is approval of the agenda, so I would take a motion to approve the agenda for tonight's meeting, June 3rd, 2026.
I believe we have some
We
changes.
have to take a motion to approve it first, and then we
I
make the
move to
changes.
approve the agenda.
Okay.
And then
I'll second.
a second. Okay, so a first from Denise and a second from Lori. Then, are there any amendments or changes to the agenda?
Yes, we do need to take off the HH, so 3.14 and 3.15. Those are gonna come back after they have some work. And we're gonna move the
5.1.
thank you, 5.1 to the first.
Okay. So there's a proposed amendment to, I'm gonna say the other one first, so a proposed amendment to move 5.1 to the top of the agenda, so it would become the new 3.1. And then all of the 3 numbers would become 4 numbers. And then we would strike what it would be the new 3 or 4.14 first read policy HH staff negotiations organizations, and 3 or 4.15 first read regulation HHR employee representation certification and decertification process. Any discussion on these proposed amendments? Okay. So I will take, I'll
Sure.
take a motion to approve the amendments.
So move.
Second.
Second, okay, so moved by Dawn and seconded by Denise. Laura Lee, if you can call the roll on the approval of the amendments to the agenda.
Denise Chapman.
Aye.
Lori Goebel.
Aye.
Dawn Kirk.
Aye.
Alexandra Lessem.
Aye.
Mike Schultz.
Okay, so the amendments passed. So now we will go approve the agenda as amended. So again, 3.1 will be the master planning committee presentation. All the 3s will become 4s, and then 4.16 will become 4.14, and 4.17 will become 4.15.
Believes.
Yes.
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 And we already had, do we need a new motion, or does it go based on the one that we already had for approving the agenda?
Yeah, I do a new motion for that.
Okay,
So I
so,
have a new motion for that to be our agenda for the evening.
Approve the new agenda. Yeah.
Second.
okay, so motion by Dawn and seconded by Denise. So Laura Lee, can you call the roll for that, please?
Denise Chapman.
Aye.
Lori Goebel.
Aye.
Dawn Kirk.
Aye.
Alexandra Lessem.
Aye. All right, thank you all. And so then we'll move to our new item 3.1, which is the master planning committee presentation.
Thank you, Vice President Lesson. Board of Education, Dr. Heller, Todd McConey, Assistant Superintendent Operations. First, I'm going to thank you on behalf of our community members for moving this up. Thank you. There was only 2 items before this, so we thought. Before I turn it over for an update on the Master Plan Committee, I just want to take a second to really thank not only the chair and co-chairs we have here, Brent and Lindsay, but the entire Master Plan. They spend quite a bit of time working through some pretty complicated issues. And it's not work they have to do. You know, they volunteer to do it. It's easy not to do it, but they do it. Not only the chair and co-chair here, but the entire committee. So just really a shout out to these two individuals here, but then to the entire master plan, because it's a commitment, and it's sometimes not the easiest decisions and conversations. So I will turn it over to Brent, who is our chair, and he'll talk you through really the year in review of the master plan committee.
How you doing? I'm Brett Grimditch. I'm the outgoing chair, and Lindsay Martin is the incoming chair. So that's the way that our committee works. She's vice chair for a year, and she comes in as the chair. Executive, we set out to talk about the 2025 bond implementation and accountability, enrollment and demographic planning, school utilization and future growth, student programming and learning environments, and then we did some review and updates of the long range facility master plan and the bylaws of the group. So that's what we set out to do in the semester or the year. And then what we achieved is we had no recommendations for school closures at this time, per policy FCA. We talked about the Kinston K-8 development school site recommendation to keep it at 16 acres and keep it within the neighborhood. There was a couple sites we talked about, and that's the one we settled on. We spent the last part of the year talking about the updates of master planning committee bylaws, so tightened up some of the language. Made some changes to sort of the draconian language, made it a little more flexible. And then we updated the long range facility master plan. And then there's a review here. We don't really feel like it's necessary to go through when we did it every single meeting. I think you all have this if you wanted to read it late tonight after you're done with this meeting. And go through all of our meeting highlights for the past year. And then Lindsay's gonna talk about the future NPC priorities that we're gonna try to tackle next school year.
Great, so like Brett said, I am incoming for the next year and we will start again in the fall on the academic year. We have a number of things on the docket for this fall, including district school right sizing, district-wide air conditioning needs, early childhood capacity, CTE and innovation campuses, special program facility impacts and additional facilities. We as a committee begin our year by looking at a number of these things and evaluating the importance of them and as compared to the district agenda, and then go through and handle those throughout the year. And as you've seen, we accomplished some of that this year, and we continuously look at right sizing throughout the year, and even in years when, for example, this year we have no recommendations.
So that's what we have for an overview. We mentioned that in August, we open up the applications. So we have a process for applications and then accepting into the committee. There is some pretty heavy lifting next year. That first bullet point, although it's 4 words, that's a lot when you look at school utilization, consolidation, right sizing. So, but regardless, we have those applications will go out August. We do a new member orientation late August, and then we either start September, October, depending on how the calendar lays out. So from there, it's board for questions.
Lori, do you want to start with questions?
No, I'll pass it this time.
All right. Dawn?
Thank you for all this. It is a lot, and I know it's a lot of data, a lot of numbers. So I appreciate getting you guys' in-depth review of things to know that there was a whole group of people who were really trying to think about this from different perspectives. With that said, I look at the 6 things that are on your priority list, and I'm like, yay, because these have all come up for us usually every year, but this year it feels like they're sort of looming. Like we know there's gonna be changes, if not next year, soon after. And I am of a mind with the way that this year has shaken out with the budgets for us to get ahead of some of this stuff instead of seeing if we can wait any longer. And I hate to say that because I know that it's not, that wouldn't be my first choice, but knowing that some of these big changes are inevitable. I think the earlier we can get recommendations that have us, really looking at where we need to look to handle some of these tough budgets will allow us to then get the community involvement for the more specific things. So thank you for taking that on and kind of put a shout out to anybody when the applications come out. This is the meeting where they're gonna talk about, or this is the committee where they talk about those kinds of things. When we worry about, are we gonna consolidate schools ever? Are we gonna have any major constructions? Are we gonna move programs? Are we gonna have programs available where my kid can access them? That's what you guys are looking at. So it's a good committee to get on if you're interested in those things. So thank you.
I do wanna note too, the district staff does a great job of keeping us informed. And so all of these things are not going to be new to the committee next year. We've been informed over time. We've been watching the trends. Like you said, it is a lot of data and we do watch it. And so next year when we're having these discussions, we're not going into it blind.
Didn't you send any questions?
Yeah, and then as I see next year and looking at, district-wide air conditioning, it just makes me think, in terms of the same experience everywhere. We have kids now that are comfortable in learning, and we have kids now that are, suffering in learning through fall. But it's also like what type of tools and resources they have to do their learning as well. And so thinking about what does a Thompson Elementary School experience look like versus, we have 7 different models right now, whatever number of schools. And so how do we provide that consistent experience? And I think that's still critical for the master planning committee to think of it in terms of, this is our middle school model, this is our K-8, this is, and then how do we do our best to get them as equitable as possible. And not just air conditioning, but all of it. But air conditioning, exclamation point for those that don't.
Yeah.
Listen, but thank you. Gave me a lot to think about.
Mike, any questions?
No, just thank you. I apologize for being late as well. I was stuck behind a train coming. But thank you. I know probably working.
So I have a question. In your the executive summary of topics, you say student programming and learning environments. Can you talk a little bit more about what that entailed?
That was, part of the master plan, the long-range facility plan that we did, talking about district standards and education standards. And the various learning environments. I think some of that was with Marie Blair too, reutilizing that facility for some needed programs that the district has.
Yeah, and we brought in Sarah Rasmussen too to tell the MPC, it's easy to look on paper and certain things, but truly was the story behind the student at TSD, and that was good for everyone to hear, because from pre-K to, through our different programs outside of 12, so the committee can wrap their heads around, this is what it really means for the student's journey, through TSD. So as they're thinking about different things on here, they can attach it to what students see and feel, so that was a lot of that as well.
Okay. Cool. Lori, do you want your chance back to ask the question?
Thank you. In regard to the AC needs, what are we actually finding as far as true needs with adjusting the calendar? How would that be helpful? Just kind of looking to, under a budget crunch, we have other physical needs that are buildings, and could we address that?
Yeah, we talked about it before, there's some complexities with changing the calendar. It pushes it into our testing season, even when you push it, when you look at the amount of temperatures that are coming outside of summer into September, it'll be such a drastic shift. I think Dr. Heller will tell you, it pushes, there's the school and the testing schedules get too crunched. So unfortunately, the shifting of summer days isn't really this a solution for it. Really, the solution we need to look at is how do we roll this out? Eventually, there's a bigger ask to physically put in buildings. But we also know that at $150 million to AC the district, it's going to be hard to get that in one ask. So what is the strategy to say, okay, here's our programs, here's where the AC should go. We have 20 schools without, how do we prioritize schools? So that's part of the work too. The work through is how do we work into what buildings we go look at. Or if there's any passive AC cooling methods we can do. We've tried a lot, we've done a lot, and we've been very strategic, but it's tough. So that's really the work around that. Yeah.
And I will say, I'll just add, I talked about this in the fall when I first got here, because this was the first place I'd ever worked where not every school had air conditioning. And I spent a lot of time those first couple of weeks going through the buildings that didn't have it and sitting and seeing what it felt like. And I was on the same boat of saying, like, why don't we just move our calendar? And then I really dug into the reason. We are beholden to state testing calendars and very specific deadlines of where those windows are. And we have, unfortunately, that's just the nature of the business that we are in. And if we were to significantly delay the start of school, we're also taking away a significant amount of instructional time before students are expected to take some of those end of year tests, those tests that are AP tests, SAT, ACT, things like that are high stakes for a lot of our kids who are seeking college or career advancement scholarships, that sort of thing. And so we don't want to disadvantage our students by dramatically changing the calendar. I have reached out to the state to say, would there ever be any flexibility on the testing calendar for districts who are dealing with this situation? And so far, there has not been any flexibility in that. So, but we've also had conversations of, do we try to figure out how to cool all of our elementary schools? Because those are the ones that, when we do have to close for a heat day, are most impacted by parents who are at work and there's young kids going home to empty houses. So do we try to figure out how to pay for all elementary schools at least to be cooled? So at least our secondary kids, if they did have to go home because of a heat day, would not be as impacted because they are able to be a little bit more self-sufficient. So we've had lots of those different conversations, and we could go a million different directions, but the dollar sign is quite large. And as you said, we have a ton of needs beyond air conditioning. So.
I do want to mention too, I actually work in educational testing, and I'm a former educator, and I would probably be the first one to talk about testing, but instead I'm going to turn it and say whole child.
Yeah.
When you change the schedule, which I was a big proponent of for years, you also change sports schedules and extracurriculars and all of and college recruiting, and so all of those things that also change. So even though I think testing gets a bad rap when it comes to some of the stuff, we also need to look at other things that go into it.
Yeah, especially if we're the only one that changes our schedule significantly. All of our surrounding districts around us don't. Those are the same schools we compete with for all the different activities and things, and so now all of a sudden we're at a disadvantage for that as well. So yeah, you're right. There's a million different things that change when we make a single isolated change like that.
It may seem like a redundant question, but sometimes it's just for other people to help them understand.
Yeah,
and get
for sure.
information out.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments? All right.
Thank you
all
guys.
very much. You're welcome to stay to the end if you want.
Thank you for changing your schedule for us.
Okay, so we will now move to 4.1, resolution of budget adoption for 2026 to 2027. Do you want to sort of do like 4.1, 4.2, 4.3, 4.4, and 4.5 all kind of together, or do you want to do them
1 through
separate?
3 first, and the other ones will be separate discussions.
Okay, perfect, thank you. Okay.
Good evening, Vice President Lesson, members of the board, Dr. Heller, and Bob Ebersol, Chief Financial Officer. With me is Zach Moser, Director of Finance. We are going to go over the budget. The first 3 items, they all relate to those are the statutory requirements of how you actually vote to adopt the budget and beginning balances and other things like that. I just, for people that did not hear me at the May board meeting, I'm going to do a quick summary of how we got here. The process starts in October with the October 1st pupil count, And then Todd and his staff do the projections for what's gonna happen based on that and other demographics going for the following year. That translates into money because we look at the per pupil count that we expect to get from the state. We also look at taxes. A portion of our real estate taxes, if our values go up, we get more taxes, but we get less state aid. We do have one mill levy override that we do get additional money if there's additional values. For next year, based on conversation with boards of assessors, we are not expecting dramatic increases in property taxes. The market has softened a bit, so we're not expecting that at this point. So with the pupil count going down, that was expected to be about $2.3 million reduction. So the first thing that is done is, as a result of fewer students, the staffing plans at the schools get adjusted due to the projections for each school and the needed teachers at the schools. So we have expected staffing ratios and make sure we have the right size of the classrooms for education. So that this year there was a major effort to speed up that process by slowing down and making sure we were having the right classes, teachers in the classrooms. HR working with learning services did a great job to make sure we had that. That includes teachers, including teachers for at-risk students, as well as special education. So there are no cuts to special education. The cuts were in the classroom reductions due to reduced students. We did do administrative review of at the building here at 800 South Taft. We reduced 11 positions here, which translated to approximately close to $1 million worth of reductions. We assume, and the budget basically shows level funded for all other positions. Health insurance, not a surprise throughout the country. Originally was going to go up 3.5% due to some restructuring of the plan. It's only going up 10%. So that's a $2.1 million increase. State aid reflecting the reduced student count and the extra money they were able to give. In light of the state budget crunch, we got an extra about $400,000, so I call it essentially double funded. So at that point, we effectively had a balanced budget, but no money for raises. So that was going on at the same time as negotiations with Thompson Education Association. We started that process, a very collaborative process between administration and the association. That resulted in the contract that you approved in May, which includes for the licensed staff steps and columns, offset by 4 furlough days. A furlough day is a non-paid day that effectively pays for the steps and columns. APT, Administrative Professional Technical, are going to get a 1.7% increase, offset by 4 furlough days. Classified are going to get a 2.76% raise and but 2 furlough days, which reflects the board's goal to try to continue to improve the salaries of the classified staff. So with a reserve draw of 1.6 million, which is less than we've done for the last few years, we have a balanced budget with that. Since the last board meeting, the packet that you've received online, we've added in the non-FTE spending. And we are betwixt and between our current Excel budgeting system and our new budgeting system, which is not fully in place, whereby items rolled up to a host account. And so therefore that was a way to summarize it, but it didn't really describe it where it's going to be actually spent. So the format that you have here is where we will actually be charging the items to a school, to a program. So that's why if you tried to go back to last year's budget, the numbers you compare to an extent, but they don't directly tie in some places. Bottom line does. As to the FTE listing, I will call it art versus science. Everybody calls a position differently depending on whether you're in the budget, in HR, or in a department. Next year, will we have some more consistent naming conventions for what those FTE positions are? But basically, the reduction of staff was the 19 positions. The other things that were moved around in some of the titles, we actually are not going down in at-risk funding, because at-risk might be an interventionist, but it's not called at-risk. So this is how we call it. So we're not reducing at-risk funding at this point. And I take a moment to say thanks to Zach and his staff for all the work that's going behind the scenes at this point. We keep talking about how do we present it in a way that makes sense. We are continuing to evolve that. I believe that the budget software should be fully up and running. I'll say the fall, Zach will say late fall, as we go through this process. And then we will restate the budget with the new budget software, so you will see it in the new format. So we're actually looking at how we're actually working on next year's budget at the same time. And oh, by the way, Zach has started the audit process for this year. So we have overlapping components at this point. The other comment, just to be clear, that the state funding for pupil count assumes a 3-year averaging. We're going down, but we get to go back 2 years. So we are actually getting more money. They recognize more students than we are actually projecting to have. And that's what they do during that part. As the funding formula gets fully funded, I'm not sure when that'll happen, but when it does, the averaging will go away. They will still have what they call a smoothing factor, which is averaging light, where they will take a certain percentage of what you had before, add it to a certain percentage the prior year and the current year. So it's a sort of a math thing, saying you get a little bit of credit for the prior things if you're going down. If you go up, you will get the higher amount. We are still projecting to go down for one other thing that we just got a recent thing, which is a success story. We have about 35 students who have graduated as juniors, because they're taking both college courses and other courses. So that's great for them, but we have 35 fewer students next year as a result of that. Good for them, and we don't just be mercenary and say, well, that money is now going away at $11,000 to $12,000 a student. So then one board member asked for exit interview for people of why we're losing the students. That would be one example of one of the things why we're losing students at this point. Administratively, so this budget has now been posted on our website. It is at the physical copy at the Levelland and Berthoud libraries. We have a budget forum on Monday at 5 o'clock in this room here, and that's been advertised in the Reporter Herald as well. And we will be opening for comments at that. In addition, at your meeting on the 17th is the true official budget hearing, and people have the ability to make comments there. So I would open it up for questions or comments that you may have had since the last time I talked.
Dawn?
Any questions?
Mike?
My turn. So,
Your turn, yeah.
thank you, Bob and Zach. I appreciate it. I know it's very challenging, not least of which is kind of the fiscal environment that we're in right now, and on top of it, trying to implement the changeover to the new tracking technology. I think will be helpful in how we kind of have that how we have that conversation with the community about our budget needs. So I look forward to seeing more of that, or to seeing that roll out in the coming months. I don't really have a question. I think it's very complicated, our budgeting, and I'm still kind of digging in and trying to understand the budget and the budget process, because it is very, very complicated. And so I just want to kind of express my appreciation for all the hard work you all put into this. So thank you.
Thank you.
Lori?
Thank you. Question on page 16, there's a professional development line, kind of middle of the page that was professional development DW for over $500,000. I wish I could be like, you know, have the download as to why some of these are just exponentially more, or there's something, you know, like this where there was a $0 amount. Is that due to new software partially, or could you
Sure.
explain some
Good
of
question.
that?
As Zach was preparing this thing, he came across it. So professional development in the current year's budget is spread over at least 3 to 4 different departments. And as you heard, we've restructured professional development, how that's being done. It is now centered in learning services. So this is taking all the money that's gone at the different part. So whereas it's a 0 there for this part, they were actually 3 different parts. So it's basically level funded.
Yeah, it's all kind of down to the bottom line and kind of anticipation. She's the SME on that one, but basically with the reducing of staff of the professional development department, it's basically a reallocation to a portion of those dollars for those professional needs.
So did it actually go down or up compared to last year?
It's effectively level funded.
Yes, it's a level funded thing. So a lot of these ups and downs you'll see in this demonstration of the non-FTE is more so reallocations and fine tuning of where that spending will happen in the next fiscal year, rather than just a net increase of $500,000 that's eye-popping. But we did, but in the narratives at the beginning of the budget, I did allude to some of the drivers on those big shifts.
And professional development was discussed during the negotiation process to make sure that that was one of the things we did an investigation. What are we spending our money on already? And the discussion was to make sure that we had a teacher voice in the process of identifying how we're going to give it, feedback of whether it's successful or not. So not only do we have the money, but is it going to be paid effectively?
I guess that's where, to me, like, if we had some explanations on this, of saying, hey, this line is a culmination of, you know, these other ones. Is there any way to do that? Because if somebody just starts looking at the budget, you know, parents, taxpayers that look at the budget, and then all of a sudden you see something like this, that they're going to be, I guess, kind of taken aback by something that was a $0, but all of a sudden, and if you say it's level, you know, having some kind of a notation on these, I mean, even for us, well, for me,
Sure.
it's very helpful. Just on that same page, media support services went up by 4 times. Went from 6,000 to 26,000. I mean, to see why that's increased.
So a lot of those ups and downs, there's basically when we develop the budget, we have a lot of the departments will reallocate their budgets as they see fit, so that will take from one item that they see that they don't need, like one expense will go away and they'll reallocate it to another expense, and that's driven by departments a lot, and so you'll see that. Or what I'll do, like primary is our admin cost, utility costs. We're all in one bucket, and I'll reallocate those instead of just being 3 different buckets by those middle school, high school. Is just an example, is reallocating, and so we look at those line items that had 0 budget the year before, but now they do. Those are kind of the shifts that we have. So that would be a reallocation from primarily department levels, but when we did get those non-FTE budgets from the departments, they have explanations to them, and a specific explanation I can certainly give to that. Give that to you when I get back to my desk.
Is that something you're gonna go over on Monday night?
Yes, yeah, we'll include that. It's important to note that the non-FTE total went from 30 million down to 29,500,000, so it's a reduction of 504. I consider that level funded as part of that.
Just, two other, I'll leave the rest of these for some other time. But on page 18, the legal services increased by over 2 times. And, also school administration went up. We just heard that, that there are 11 less employees.
So this is non-FTE expenses on this part. Doesn't include the personnel. Traditionally, we've underfunded legal, and we would come back to you for additional funding at that part. In fact, on the over 50,000 contracts later on today's agenda, we're asking for additional funding, and it's probably more than we would think we will need, but we're going to try to do it. So we are trying to do more realistic numbers. We're not expecting more lawsuits next year.
Well, hang on a second, sorry, can I interject?
Yes, you can.
Are we talking about the 135?
It's page 18. Legal services. It's 2,300. That was just over 2 times the amount.
Yeah, so if you'll see on the legal services, we're up by 135, and you'll see down in election services, just below that, it went down by that same amount, so it's a shift in the budget.
Okay.
This is when
Yeah.
I use the term betwixt and between, is that it's almost going from centimeters to inches or inches to centimeters. As I say, I just buy a liter of Coke, I don't know what the reports are.
Yeah, color coding to have some kind of a draw to, from one grouping to another, like I said, just.
Yeah, and that's kind of an example of what we're talking about. So when you look at the bottom line, we went total for program 2,300 from 667 to 650, and that decrease of 17,000. And that 135 is just a shift from one line item to the other.
Okay, so you're actually not increasing that.
No.
No.
That one. Okay. Ask a whole bunch more
That'd be
questions.
great. If you wanna send them out in advance, we can be more prepared.
Thank you.
Is it possible, cause I hear that you guys know this, I'm amazed. Is it possible for us to do like just the simplest little key to say like asterisk is just throughout the entire document, those moments where it is just shifting from one accounting bucket to another, because I heard that that's a lot of what this is. I mean, I know you started out by clearly identifying this. The reason I'm asking for that is because I personally have heard hundreds of hours of these questions, while I feel like you've also clearly identified it, but it is complex, and I think that's why. I know that in the middle between these two systems, we're gonna continue to have this until we have that real in front of us. This is what the bottom line is. And so I'm actually just thinking about like, how do we narrow down the amount of work that you guys are having to do to answer this thing over and over and over again? If we could have just the quickest of identifiers to say this asterisk means that it is getting accounted for in another bucket. This plus sign is not a plus sign because that's math, but some other one is showing that it was a cut to the budget or moved from district to admin, that kind of thing. Just to hobble us along a little better and keep it as simple as possible. Because I'm really concerned about the amount of time all this already takes, and then how long it takes to answer the in-depth questions over and over again. They're essentially the same questions that we've reviewed it since October.
We will see what we can create on
I
that.
appreciate it.
Color-coded things.
I really appreciate it. I am really trying to think of you, and I'm grateful for you.
Appreciate it.
I just have one question. There's a couple of things that talk about the swap match, and I don't remember what that is.
Yeah, so the swap match is another one of those examples on that we identified with the legal services going from the election services line to the legal services line. So in the budgeting process, the theme was we want the budget previously, you'll see the swap match go down in, I believe it was program 2100.
Yeah.
But it's just a reallocation from that to, the $245,000 is going from that 21, program and being reallocated, I believe, actually, I specifically pointed that out in the narrative, so I'll probably be able to grab that easier by going up to what I wrote. It's just going from one program to the other. Okay, so like the SWAP, student instructional, it went, from, 2100, and went from student support to, student instructional. So it was that swap, instead of going within the program, it's going from one program to the next, because that's actually where, our accounting is, allocating the match when, they net the swap out from our state aid.
So it's a match of the state funding that comes to us. We've just moved it from one category to another, but we're still having the swap match, we're not eliminating.
But what is it, what is the FWAP, what is that?
Like, what does swap match mean? What does that
That's
mean?
what this swap.
Isn't that the school to work? Yeah.
School Work
Okay.
Alliance program.
Thank you,
Thank you.
thank you.
Sorry,
I
We were doing
assumed
it.
I knew what the question was, so I apologize.
we did the accounting answers.
You did.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so so basically that would be covered for 4.1, the resolution of budget adoption. That we will vote on that in 2 weeks. And then can you talk briefly about what the appropriation, the resolution of appropriation, and then the resolution of use of beginning fund
Right.
balance?
So we have the budget, we do the actual official appropriation. You actually have to take the beginning fund balances and appropriate those, so those are available as well. We don't spend beyond the budget, but it technically, the CD, Colorado Department of Education requires us to say, here's the money that you have available. So therefore, when you actually spend more in expenditures than revenues, which we are actually drawing on reserves, it gives us the authority to do that. So these are all the technical ways we actually have to vote to approve all the budget components.
Okay. So any further questions on those first 3 items, 4.1, 4.2, and 4.3?
What time is the meeting on Monday?
5 p.m.
So then let's move on to 4.4, the state of Colorado interest-free cash flow loan program resolution.
So assuming the board approves the budget, we have to spend money during the year. And the state aid comes to us all through the whole year. But since such a large component of our budget is the property tax doesn't come in the beginning of the year. So the state created a no interest loan program where we can borrow the money based on the cash flow projection, which will be given to you. The state has not released the projection forms at this point. And as our taxes go up and state aid goes down, we have a greater need for the loan borrowing. Board policy allows us to do traditional revenue anticipation money that we pay interest. This is a non-interest at this point. We are going to be asking you for a $40 million authorization, although we expect to only have to borrow about $30 million. But it gives us, the state always says, add more into the authorization so you don't have to go back to the board again. But if we borrow more than the 30 projection, we would come back and notify you.
Okay. Any questions about that, starting with Denise?
No question.
Mike?
Red carpet, mid candy bar, sorry. No, the one question, it's not really a question, but we look at it, I mean, I understand the need for short term to manage our budget, but it's the state's not really loaning us the money, they're just it's kind of a.
No, they're actually loaning us the money, and literally the day, next day, the day after we get our taxes, we have to pay them back.
Right, but I mean, it's like the state gives it and the state takes it
Yes.
away. I mean, it's like, it's not like if we had to go to a bank to get a $40 million or $30 million line of credit to mention, or to manage our budget. It's not, I'm not being critical. I think when we say we have to go out and borrow money, and it comes across as a little, it lands a little differently. But really, what the state is just saying is we'll prepay some of the money
It's an advance on our pay for later.
pay for
But-
later.
but every year, we're getting less and less state aid. In fact, there are some schools that don't get any state aid. They are a fully funded authority. So as the valuation of our taxes, our new growth and everything else like that goes through, it really is not state money. It is money that we aren't getting in time at the beginning of the school year.
But then, if we do get to that situation, then we're gonna have to look at lines of credit or other.
No, because there's always this state program.
Okay, so
The board policy allows those to the line of credit and the other things like that. But as long as the state is giving us this free, they're effectively giving it up their interest earnings to give the money to the schools.
yeah, and it's
I hear what you're saying.
so thank you.
Lori?
You just touched on it, that they give up their interest earnings in order to loan it to us. So technically, overall, we are still, because we're losing, as a state, they're losing out on that money, even though they're giving it to us, quote unquote, for free. So there is a cost to the state overall.
It's a non-appropriation appropriation. If they were actually show, here's the revenue, we're gonna give you the added interest in that part. So, yeah, it is a program that there is a cost, but no cost to us.
Okay, and then you did answer what the predicted drought is going to be this next year, which you said around 30 million. So, because I was just pulling up the numbers, what was the number in 2025? What was there?
We borrowed about $25 million. I'm sorry. It was about $30 million. Yes.
Thank you.
Dawn? Okay, and I don't have any questions. So 4.5, the 25-26 budget adjustment.
So last year, Zach and I you had been here 5 months, and I had been here 4 months, and we didn't come before the board for a budget adjustment. And if you remember the audit that came through, we didn't get a finding, but they said, oh, by the way, you spent more than your budget, because you hadn't come back to the board and say, please adjust your budget. And so to come to you with a packet that has to get to you at the end of May and tell you what we're going to spend by June 30th, which is not actually done until August with all the accruals going back, we have to give you an estimate of making sure we don't expend more than the budget. So there's two things that we're doing, is that last year we had not budgeted for the state's contribution to the unfunded liability for our pension, the para pension. This $4 million is going to be a revenue and expense that's gonna go against this. We don't necessarily think it's gonna be 4 million, maybe less, but it's gonna equal out, whatever it is, it'll be there. That will allow us to not have that auditor saying you've expended more, so that gives us some flexibility at this point. We still expect to be within our budget overall within the general fund and the various funds. The other item that is a change is capital projects funds. The board approved earlier this year the Zayo project where we are connecting all our schools with fiber, including Bertha. Where we'll be all able to be redundant, and if one school goes down, the entire system goes down. We're able to actually take care of that system. So we came to you and we said we're going to have a spending plan over several years. They are actually accomplishing it at a faster rate than we expected. So this $400,000 transfer is taking next year's money and putting it into this year. And since we're in June, it's like within a period and that type of thing. So in next fiscal year, there will not be a payment on that, and it'll be in 28 will be the next time on that part. So we're not increasing expenses, we're just moving it around. And since we're going from the general fund to the capital project fund, that requires a board vote. So we'll be coming to you for that as well.
Mike, question starting with you.
No, I was gonna ask about the fiber if they're linked, but it's probably for a different.
Yeah, but, and they've actually done a lot of they've installed the cabling or at least the pipes around the district already.
But we have a dedicated line to schools, or are we piggybacking on other existing we're not piggybacking on other fiber networks on that?
No, we'll have our own dedicated.
So we do have a dedicated line to every single school, but we are using Zayo's fiber network. So what we are doing is trying to get that least fiber to each one of our buildings.
Cool. Thank you for that.
Lori,
Any questions on that?
Dawn, Denise? Okay, I don't have any either, so I think you guys are off the hook. Thank you.
Everybody's welcome on, I do have one more comment.
Yes, please.
So, 27-28 budget will be coming before you a year from now. So, we did furloughs this year. That amounts to about $2.5 million worth of deferred expense because staff are giving up days and pay. Next year, health insurance is gonna go up, probably another $2 million. Pupil count is expected to go down again, because we're not leveling off yet, 2.3 million, so we're up to about 6.8. Without giving raises or cost of living. The calculation this year was about $1.4 million per 1% pay raise for all the staff. We're looking at close to a $10 million issue. So as you start considering the 2 ballot questions that will expect to be there, depending on whether there's signatures, but it's at least one from the legislature, that will insert more money for schools, that's something to think about. If those don't pass, we will be looking at some serious repercussions for the school. I didn't really want to leave on that note, but it's my duty to say we don't do one-year budgeting, we look out. The other thing is, and what was appreciated that they actually went before us, the master planning committee is looking at consolidation and possible closures of schools, which could go to address some of these issues and may pay for some of this funding as well. With the understanding of students first, right education, right number of teachers, right education programs in the schools. That's what we start first, and how do we pay for it? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
We will now move on to 4.6, high school biology curriculum adoption.
Tiffany Jones joining us.
Hello. Vice President Weston, Dr. Heller, members of the board, and Tiffany Jones, Director of Curriculum and Learning. So after that great news, I get to bring the exciting information about high school adoption for biology. Every year, if you're new to this process, we bring forward all of our adoptions. This year we have high school biology. In the summary we have provided for you, this is really to provide a guaranteed and viable curriculum for all of our students in high school in the biology course. We had about 12 teachers. We piloted 2 curriculums this year, and in the appendices, I think there was about 84 pages of documentation of our process that we can dive into if you've got further questions. But we want to make sure that across all of our schools, our biology students are having this similar experience through the GBC. When we think about what this means for our kids financially, it is going to be a cost. However, we do have the funds. It's through our secondary mill account. We've got training, overseeing professional development right now. We're really excited that we'll be able to pull the teachers together on the district days and make sure that they understand the curriculum components. We'll have a trainer come in on August 13th next year for the teachers. And that we will have ongoing training from the curriculum company as well as our team to support the implementation of biology. We had every high school represented for the components. We had 2 pilot curriculums. We had HMH and SAVIS. Those were the 2 curriculums that the teachers decided to pilot and trial.
And that was really exciting. And as we move forward, Lorelei, if you want to look at the document that you are on, if you want to go to starting on page 3, please. So here for you, we always provide the survey results. It's important to note that we survey the students, the staff, the admin, and the families. And through the surveys, we really always highlight all of those value statements that our teachers have identified as key components that they want to see in a curricular material. And so in there, we've listed out exactly where SAVIS fell on the survey and where HMH fell. And when you start to look at all of those documents later on, we have the total results. So on page 7, you will see when we do a blind reveal. We actually don't tell the teachers. We put the color components up because typically what happens is they always have a real interest in one of them. And so we want to make sure that it's a very neutral process, that we do the blind reveal to make sure that we are going with the one that supports the core values when we decided them. And so sometimes when you put up the name, they're like, ooh, but I really wanted this one. If you remember with the literacy adoption last year, they said they weren't gonna vote until they knew which one they were voting on. But we make sure this process is really vetted. And so when you compare these numbers and each of these components, it was a clear winner that SAVIS was the one that we needed to move forward with, and the teachers definitely agreed with that. Next year, through professional development, something that came out of this adoption process is how do we level up those honors courses where they're using our core curriculum, and then what are we doing to level it in that honors, AP, IB, because what typically has happened is as soon as we throw another name on the course, that somewhat gives them permission to not use our curriculum, and we've said that can't happen with biology. Next year, we're going to move into chemistry. The chemistry teachers were really excited about this biology pilot, and they said, we want to join next year, which of course the standards have changed and been updated, so we need to follow that as well. But what we are proposing tonight is for all of our high school biology classes, including IB, AP, pre-AP, honors, Lisa, we are proposing that we move forward with the adoption of SAVIS for our teachers starting next year. The one thing I want to point out is if you guys remember, if you were on the board last year, we brought to you middle school science. Something that we've noticed is a huge lack of consistent materials for our science classes. And so based on the building budget, they haven't always had the correct materials to do the hands-on learning experiences. This proposal and this budget item, the $265,000 that we're proposing, it includes 1 year of kits to level every classroom up so that we're all with the same hands-on experience. We've got the beakers, the chemicals, the lab equipment. Obviously, we would order the live animals because that's huge for biology, but that it wouldn't be changing the experience from one school to the other because they didn't have the physical materials to do the experiments in the labs that go with this curriculum. So we're really excited that we can provide that for our teachers, and then we would see what would they really need ongoing, which is why we did a 1 year purchase of that, and then we would just be adding some of those consumable materials that get used and then you would want to toss them. But for 1 year, we want to see if it's worth. Well, we know the 1 year is worth it, but do we need those consumables, and can we buy it cheaper versus going through the company? So we did a 1 year purchase proposal for that, and then it would be an ongoing as we continue on. But we would want to do a survey of what do you actually need that you don't have just in your classroom.
All right. Questions starting with Lori?
Thank you. On page 2, you mentioned the identified core values. Was that printed out somewhere? Did I miss that?
When you look at, starting on page 3, when you start looking at the perception, interest, and the stakeholder input is there, when you start looking through each of those components that are highlighted right here, their core values would be like, where are the real world connections in this? What about the online ease? Print materials, ease of use, engaging materials, differentiation with cultural backgrounds and ways of thinking, meaning do our kids see themselves in the curriculum? Those were what they identified, and so those were the rubric scores there.
I saw a lot of things on, the student, the teacher, the administrator, and then I saw on page 5 that there was a Google form that was available from a date in January to March, which was effectively just February. And was I correct in reading that there were only 3 responses on the community input?
Typically, we have very few responses. We put it at Loveland Library, we put it on our district page, we put it at the Berthoud Library, and then we house it here. So we have 3 locations, and then we email every family of a student that is in a pilot. That email goes to every single family member saying your student is participating in a pilot. We want your feedback. And we do it with both curriculums. And so typically we have 2. If we have 3, we would email all 3 of those surveys, but we email every single family of the students to get their feedback as well.
And then on the student perception, what were the number of responses from the students?
We go and interview every student. So every student, I could give that to you, but our team goes in and talks to the kids because we wanna hear it from them and make sure they're filling out the survey. We do give them candy to make sure that they fill out the survey. But we actually go and do that. So the student response is really high.
And then on, I guess what was kind of concerning to me is like on page 16, quote number 1, it was, I think that the Savas biology curriculum is fine. Many of my students probably felt it was too difficult. Many of them are not practiced in reading a textbook, nor do they seem particularly adept at reading. I guess I just kind of found that a bit concerning. And then the pilot administrator, the quote number 2 there is, I think the book is great for the average student and the above average learner. The reading level could be a bit higher for ESS or ELD students working on vocabulary. So I guess I was just, to me those were kind of concerning, especially the first one. That while we have the READ program in place, it's to get the kids to, say 3rd grade level, that in high school, they're noting the challenges still. So I guess more of an observation than a question. So thank you.
I guess can I ask that as a question, what grade level is this written for, since it's a high school curriculum?
It's written at high school level.
So
that's where we would want to provide access for students with disabilities or a language, a student learning or a language with the academic vocabulary. What we've noticed though is the materials, part of the reason we needed to do this adoption is we actually were not at grade level standard for biology. And that's what we've noticed is typically teacher created materials are well below grade level, and now we need to raise that rigor up. And so that is our teacher's job to provide the access when the grade level text is hard, and what scaffolds are we putting in place to make sure that they can access it without losing the content and the rigor. So we're actually very excited that the rigor is being brought up with high academic vocabulary and high science content to ensure that our students are ready for their futures.
Me too, and I'm glad you're doing days of PD, because that feels like the place that they're gonna need the support probably more than anything. Assuming that they're comfortable with the content, the idea that I am gonna have students in my room who may need me to adapt this significantly in order for them to learn the language of science to go with their ability, their proficiency and comprehension skills. I love that, and I know it's a lot as we take it on, but I think it's some of the feedback we've gotten from students who struggle with one content, feeling like everything else is boring because it's dumbed down to that level, and it's not that they think at that level, it's that they read at that level. And so I'm excited about having that be another place that we're sinking our teeth into helping kids get something that's challenging to them in a different way. I think it's great. The other question I had was really as we look, I love the plan for the consumables, and I know we've done that for some other things before, so it's not a new concept. Mike, my thought on that always is that we still sometimes end up with the schools doing it a little differently once it's in their hands, and then we end up where you we're saying we end up, which is that some schools don't have the materials, some schools didn't have the budget for the materials. And so as long as we can kind of continue to have your oversight at that district level to level that out a little bit, it helps me feel a little better, so we don't have that situation continue the way that it somehow always does. I know they're not trying to, but there's always somebody who's like, I didn't know I needed to order that, or I didn't know I needed to plan for that, and then my kids don't have it, so, awesome, thank you.
Denise?
Were the two, kind of cost competitive, or was the one a better value?
I will tell you, when we don't decide to go to a company, I don't go through all of the quote process. We work really well with both of these companies. I can tell you Savvis is typically lower than HMH. When we think about our other adoptions, Savvis was a front runner with middle school biology, HMH. So I mean, they're pretty comparable. But I did not, once we decided that we were moving forward with HMH, or with Savvis, excuse me, I didn't even go for a quote for HMH. They also, you know, didn't have the same qualities that our teachers were looking for, and so I wanted to not go down that road with them.
So then will it be Savvis in middle school and Savvis in high school, or?
Middle school is actually HMH, but it met their needs, and so when you think about the continuum, it really is very similar, and when we think about those crosswalks between a middle school and a high school experience, they're actually very similar. The content in the HMH book was actually very different, and that's why the teachers chose Savvis. But we make sure the way the curriculum is written is actually very similar to the HMH that we use in middle school, the components of it.
Mike?
Just a quick question, just help me kind of clarify and understand. So with biology and science, it's not the Savvis or HMH, they're not approved by CDE, like, correct? Is that how that, like the reading curriculum, they have recommendations, but
Correct.
there's a lot more. And we picked we have the two, how many more what was the universe of curriculum that we could?
There's a ton.
It's massive.
It is, I was gonna say, Dr. Heller has done this role before, and so he definitely knows. We use EdReports as one of our main kind of vetting tools. EdReports is a neutral kind of site, unbiased site. So you can plug in anything in EdReports and say, okay, I wanna look at this. When we started looking though, we automatically take some curriculums out. They can't be translated. They didn't have a workbook. We wanted to make sure a student had the workbook experience. It's not digital and print. It doesn't actually fit with ClassLink. Those are automatic factors, because if it doesn't work with our systems, then we need to take them out. ClassLink and ITS, I will tell you, Kelly's team is at the table right when we start reviewing each of these curriculums. So we typically start with 12 to 15, and then we start to go down the list. What has a DPA with us? How do we integrate with, ITS? Do they have multiple access points for language? Does it only come in English, or does it come in English, Spanish, and other languages? So then we start dwindling down. They looked at 3 very critically because of the lab component. A lot of curriculums don't come with that hands-on lab component, but then you're asking teachers to plan those labs with something they're not comfortable with. So we start kind of going down, but there are hundreds of curriculum companies out there.
And we do this on a 3-year cycle, is that, am I
Curriculum
understanding?
adoptions are
Yeah,
specific.
like if we adopt the Savvis for high
It's
school,
a 6-year deal.
it's a 6-year
It's a
deal.
6-year cycle, which we follow the state cycle, which is about 6 years.
So, and we have HMS for the other one, but you said they're not that far off, or they're, would we then kind of, when we get to the point of adopting or looking at middle school curricula for biology or science, I'm assuming that would influence that decision to some degree, but the reason why I said, because it's not really a question, but what I'm kind of, I understand like the selection process, but I think what I'm kind of curious about is what's the feedback loop? Like, can we get into it for a year or two and just say, you know what, it's not meeting our needs, or we're struggling, it wasn't what we thought of, how do we manage that ongoing kind of assessment of the curriculum that we do to make sure it continues to meet the needs? Beyond just looking, because I hate just saying, look at the test scores, right? Because that doesn't tell the whole picture. So I just was curious. as to how we build that?
Our team is meeting with teachers every day, actually. We do teacher work groups, and so if I think about one of the curriculums, ELA for middle school is in My Perspectives. I believe we're in year 4 right now. We're constantly meeting with the language arts teachers to say, what do we need to improve? What's, maybe what's getting exhausted that we need to add in something. So our team meets with teachers constantly. This is the curriculum we have, like this is the vehicle. Now what are we adding to the curriculum to make it even better? Or change and introduce some text that might be for a 2026 student versus somebody that's still talking about floppy disks. So we constantly are meeting with our teachers to do that check, because again, we sign a 6-year contract, but we also know after about 3 is the sweet spot that we need to start adding and introducing some other components. But we use our teachers to do that, and then we run the teacher work groups.
And as part of the contract with the curriculum, I mean, there's updating and additions that we get over time. But I just have to point out, I learned computers on floppy disks.
So did I.
Just to date myself.
So did I. But we do the digital licenses for that reason, because they're constantly making updates and changes, and then we would get access to all of those components.
Sure, cool, thank you.
Absolutely.
So I just had a question, with that both of them scored pretty low in some areas, like the student, or the easy to navigate, or the comments, or the differentiated and accessible and things like that, and so I was just kind of curious, is there a point where in the pilots that you would be like, oh, we're not gonna go with either of these?
Yeah, so I actually run this component where we won't ever adopt anything that they're not all in on. So when we start looking at the scores, I will say to the team, we're moving forward this, and is that, we do a fist of 5, we're agreeing to that. When we start talking about these components, we might say, great, if it is not easy to navigate, is that something we can overcome as we learn it with professional development, or is this where we need to have a pause and start opening back the process? Some of these components, easy to navigate, that gets lower, or that's typically a lower score because they get it for 3 weeks. And so they haven't navigated each of the platforms that we use. When we think about a curriculum platform now compared to what it used to be, there are so many components that they will add access points, which does make it a little bit clunky and hard to navigate, but those are things that they said, nope, as soon as we get that learning curve, we're good to go, we can live with this. But yes, when we think about some of the other pieces that we're lower in, that's where we would use those teacher work groups to make sure we're elevating up.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. When I was researching these, just online, it gave the illusion, maybe you can correct me on this, that it only came from the aspect of evolution and not showing other possibilities, such as intelligent design, but the books came out of, Savas came out from strictly an evolution standpoint.
I know I can't answer that question because I have not looked through the entire curriculum. When we start looking at any curricular piece, we absolutely follow the NGSS science standards as well as the Colorado State standards. And then Colorado has moved into the more phenomena base, but I can't answer if it's only that component piece, but we follow our main guiding force is our Colorado standards.
Okay, because you mentioned curriculum for all at the very beginning, so just so that they have the thought process of being able to critically think about things.
And the goal through the science standards is around how do we do problem solving and how are we critically thinking. But we follow all of our Colorado State standards, which is where we use the ed reports that I was discussing earlier. We plug all of those pieces in, but Colorado is pretty tightly aligned to our NGSS standards for science across the United States.
Anything else? Thank you, Tiffany.
Thanks.
And then we go to 4.7, the Head Start grant application with William Carroll.
Thank you, Madam President, Dr. Hill, and members of the board. William Carroll, Director of Early Childhood. And tonight I come to present a much more streamlined and efficient Head Start grant application. So in the presentation, I'll update you what's the big changes here. And so, first of all, the application is if you remember, I presented the self-assessment, the community assessment, and then we go into things like data and those, if you go back to that slide there. And so these all go into the work that we're gonna do in the continuing year, so in our case, it'll be for 26, 27. So the big change this year is that Head Start has put out guidance that we are no longer required to submit a Head Start application unless there are significant changes to the program. And so there are no significant changes to our program. The difference is, and I mentioned this earlier, is that when you go to the next slide, we are gonna be working alongside with the elementary levels on universal design for learning. So that's the big switch from what we did this year. But in terms of everything else, there are no other changes to the Head Start grant. So transportation, human resource management, all those pieces remain the same. What does change a little bit is, as you heard Bob and Zach present earlier, changes to the budget, which I've included in the information that I provided to you. What's also different this year is, in the past, if you were on the board at that time, whenever you got a cost of living adjustment, I had to come to both the policy council and to the board to get approved to use those funds. This year, they just applies the COLA to everyone's salaries. So one of the changes is that we no longer have to get approval from those because they always went to the same thing. So again, and I actually just came back from the Head Start conferences, it's still going on, but they were addressing this, that they're trying to become more efficient and they want us to use our time more efficiently rather than taking the time doing some of these things that necessarily don't need that kind of attention. So there is no application for the COLA anymore, it just goes into the budget, and what we do is apply it to retroactive to our budget to July 1st, and it is added to the remainder of the school year. And so this is just a cutout of, it's just a visual of where our budget goes. And so if you'll take a look, primarily the bulk of it goes to salaries and benefits. And then the rest of it is just more on the administrative side with supplies, some travel. That includes like when we have our home visitors go visit families, they get reimbursed for mileage, things like that. We have other staff training, and primarily that is things that are required by Head Start and by licensing and the health department. We have to do all those things before we get open for the school year. And then there's our indirect costs that we use to support our budget. So before I take any questions, I also provided for you the original 2630 grant application. So that's the 60-page actual application that was sent, and then if you want to get more into that piece. And also I included the budget for the upcoming school year, but if you go into that document, the grant update, and just scroll down a little bit, I did want to highlight one thing. If you go all the way to the bottom,
To the bottom of the document.
the next page, yes, please, thank you. These are our new goals. So these are the new school readiness objectives, and what I wanted to highlight about this is something new that TS Gold has done, is that they've aligned the gold objective with the Colorado State standard when appropriate. So what's reflected in this is that the state standard matches our goal, and so our goals match what the expectation is for what level kids should be at by the time of their 4-year-old, at the end of 4 years old. So, and if it didn't apply, then we had the widely held expectation for that band for those students. So it holds the same, except what we did is that it holds us to more of the standard than a level that was unclear before. We're still gonna monitor all 38 objectives, but where focus is particularly on school readiness for the upcoming school year. So that being said, then the last piece is that the upcoming budget that I provided in there. Sorry, that one. So it has the breakdown of everything in there, and this is a requirement of Head Start that we try and be as concise as possible. And there's always a balance that you don't want to be so concise that you hold yourself to a place where you can't spend the money. So we break them up into broader categories to allow us that flexibility, because sometimes projects can't be filled in the same year that you do it. So it allows you to move the funds if it can't be happening the year to the following year. Okay? So when you scroll that, you get into the detail of salaries and benefits. Sorry, this page is awfully tiny because we couldn't figure out a way to make it. Sorry.
Those are the problem. I think it's great.
It's a way that we were trying to make it that, because they also have a limit on pages you can submit to Head Start. They're very, I mean, so for example, they get into things like, it has to be a 12-point, and it has to be X amount of pages, so there's a limit to what we can do, so. And if you scroll down to the other, it talks about what the travel might look like, where our funds are being spent, and that kind of thing, okay? So that being said, do you have any questions for me?
Dawn?
I'm just so excited about Universal Design for Learning, it's ridiculous.
It's gonna be amazing work,
I am
especially
so
with the, I think with we're really trying to build a seamless transition from pre-K to K. And if we can do that, kids are going in with the same academic vocabulary, same MTSS supports, they'll better get into the learning and focus on that rather than something else.
Thank you.
Denise?
Yeah, so the readiness, as you think about this year, I know you're talking about next year, but what percent of the kids have met the readiness expectations
Yeah, that's a
for
good
this
question.
year?
So this year, we, depending on which, like I'm looking at language and literacy, we'd said 85% of our 4-year-olds would be at a level 6 in literacy for this year. So we said 85%, we got to 78%. So that's pretty good. So there's still some work to be done, but in terms of what we get, because the other thing to remember is that we don't start with the same cohort of kids that at the beginning of the year to the end. What happens is because we always are consistently enrolling kids, we add kids to that cohort throughout the school year. So the good thing is that each benchmark from the fall to the spring, we show an increase. But when those numbers come in as you add kids, it either can impact it positively or negatively depending on what experiences and skills the students already have prior to coming into our program.
Thank you.
I don't have any questions. I know you've kind of been before us a few times recently, so I appreciate all your time, and I'm just a huge supporter. I mean, given the impact this program has had since its inception, I gladly kind of continue to support what you're doing. So,
thank you.
Lori?
Nothing.
I just have a question on the budget. It says the total budget is the 2,370,000, and the federal share is that, and then there's the non-federal share is 592. Where does that 592 come from?
It's the non-federal share is what we contribute as a district to support the program.
Okay.
So the Head Start requires a percentage from the district. It's kind of our buy-in to the program.
Okay. Okay. Perfect.
does that include like in kind, like facility use?
Yes, so we have transportation included in that, facility, utilities. Some employees that are in the program are paid by the district, and that goes in towards that cost.
Okay. Anything else? Thank you.
Thank you.
And then we will go to 4.8, first read policy JICJ, student use of cell phones and other personal technology devices with Kelly Sane.
Hello, board members, Dr. Heller, Kelly Sane, Chief Technology Officer. Second read, technically, of the board policy.
Feels like the 5th read or something.
Yeah, exactly. So, so we are bringing back with some changes. So if you will look at the memo, some of the changes that we made were revision to the scope and the purpose and scope category. Talking a lot about the technology can be a useful tool in the learning environment. What we made some changes to at the board's discussion was during unstructured time. So we are not permitting elementary and middle school students to have their devices during unstructured time. We are allowing high school students to use their personal device PTDs before or after school, during lunch, maybe at after school activities, and we will have school guidelines around this.
And we emphasize again that devices are considered a privilege and that could be revoked, and that they should remain out of sight and unused during passing periods and in hallways. Exceptions are made for IEPs, 504 plans, and other medical needs. Then we clarified a little bit more about the instructional time, where we still allow for professional judgment. So I'm thinking about when we just talked about the lab pieces, just wanted to clarify that our devices do not allow students to record videos or to take any kind of pictures or anything like that. So any student who has a Chromebook would not be able to take a video of a lab experiment or record some different things. So sometimes allowing teachers the professional judgment to be able to maybe take do a QR code or do some multimedia experiences, maybe to take a photograph of notes or anchor charts would be an important process for us. So we still are allowing that to happen, again, only at discretion of the teacher. And then we have additional administrative discretion language about a pattern of behavior and more clarity about repeated violations. And then we eliminated that confiscated device pickup as it was clarified a little bit more in the earlier policy.
Are you ready?
Yeah.
I am ready for questions.
All right, Denise.
I think.
Mike, go ahead. I need to formulate this.
Okay, we'll come back to you. Mike?
So this is the first reading for me because I was at the last meeting. But, so I was trying to pull up my notes, but I can't find them now. So I appreciate the direction the draft is going, and I think that one of the things that I've been trying to kind of collect my thoughts and digest everything and think about it a little bit. And I think one of the challenges I think we're facing as a board is the kind of where the world is moving. And I think it's moving towards a more restrictive cell phone use. At the state legislature, I mean, you're seeing it in state legislatures around the country. And I'd like to kind of be ahead of that a little bit. And I think we're kind of moving in that direction. And I appreciate kind of where you're headed, because it's not simple. And I've kind of spoke with Dr. Heller about it a little bit, and I want, even though I think, if it were up to me, I think we would have a far more restrictive policy, but I recognize that, you're dealing with 14,000 or 12,000 some students at different levels in different schools, and so I want to make sure you have the latitude to kind of implement some of the policies and allow us to kind of course correct and work with you, because I feel like this isn't the last time, at least, and I've got 2.5 or 3 more years, 3.5. I have a feeling it's going to come back multiple times, and we're going to have to review it, and it wouldn't surprise me if the state legislature sometimes puts more restrictive imposes. So I think kind of being ahead of it a little bit and understanding the steps we need to take and how we can manage it effectively and efficiently will be is really important. So I think I think I'm inclined to kind of be supportive of it as written. I have thought about it. I know there's been a lot of we've been getting a lot of emails from the bell to bell ban, and I struggle with that, because I feel like if you want a bell to bell ban, don't send your kid to school with a phone.
Correct.
But as a parent, I also understand. I sent my kid to school with a phone, and I'm there's I recognize my own hypocrisy in some ways, and the struggle as a parent with that. And so, I want to find a way that we can kind of work collaboratively at the board and kind of in partnership with Dr. Heller and your team to make sure that how it gets implemented and how we can be supportive of how we treat technology and personal technology in the school. So there's not really a question, but I think given that I apologize I was not able to attend the meeting, I want to just kind of share with you kind of my thoughts and where I stand on that. So
Lori?
I do want to thank Director Schultz for sending out the video. That was very interesting. I mean, this is very, very important. I kind of go back to what President Boyd said at the last meeting. It's always easier to back off something that be more strict, and then it's easier to loosen the rules. My question is, because the video talked about the pouches, I know we heard about the pouches at CASB, and there's actually a school district that has them on sale for half price. Not saying that's the way to go, but because I know that was a concern that Dr. Heller had as far as keeping the devices safe and secure and away from the kids, and without risk to the district. So is that what we're looking at for the K through 8 or?
At this time, we are not. The cost would be about $526,000 for us to be able to buy pouches for all of our students. So, and we would need to replace 20% of those pouches every year. Our students are able to go onto TikTok and find creative ways to get out of those pouches very quickly. So, so that would not be something that we would consider at this time.
And
none
they're
of their
asking
phone
for-
is in the pouch, though they couldn't go.
I'm
They
sorry.
couldn't go on TikTok because their phone's already in the
Their phone's
pouch, so,
pouch.
no.
The source.
Some creative
Our kids are
ways.
smarter than we are.
Yes, yes.
Yes,
That's driving the school thing.
that's what, I guess I kind of go back to, our Attorney General here in Colorado has actually joined that part of that meta lawsuit in California, and it seems like everything is leaning towards a more restrictive. And as far as the inclusivity, what I have to question is if a teacher does have the students take out their phone for something, and you are that parent that says, no, my kid's not gonna have a cell phone, or they have an older model cell phone. How does that play into, keeping everything, making kids feel included if they don't have a cell phone or they don't have the latest, greatest? And whereas I feel like kind of that put away for all day seems to be a little bit more of a level playing field.
So currently, teachers ask people to take out their devices if they would need it for, a QR code or something else. And then our teachers are awesome. They'll say, hey, if you don't have your cell phone, I'll give you the URL and just send it to you in a chat. So there is accommodations and ways that teachers are able to deliver that potential challenge that might exist. We just currently don't have ways to do multimedia and some other kinds of things because our devices do not allow to record pictures and video.
Well, and that is something that I did discuss with Dr. Heller, because there is always, doing the URL right on their Chromebooks rather than using their phones. So if we're investing in the Chromebooks, it's like, what is the necessity? Really, they don't absolutely need to have their phones.
And again, teacher discretion, that idea. The URL would allow you to go to a document. Some of the things that our teachers might ask to do, like you can't use a URL to record what's happening in your biology experiment. So that would be an explanation, and our teachers they'll say, hey, could one person from this team take out their phone and record it and share it with the rest of your team members? So not everyone would need to be able to do that as a process. And again, teacher discretion, not every single day, something that would be an exception, not the norm.
Yeah, I just want to add, like the idea being that the standard in the classroom is that the phones are away.
Yep.
The expectation is when kids are walking to classrooms, their phones are away, they're not being seen, they're not being used, they're not heard. And then, if there is a specific reason why a teacher needs a student to do something with a device, and I've seen some very creative ways teachers have done that, and there's also teachers who never do it. And I would say I'm of a mind of I want it as much as possible to trust the professional judgment of our educators, that if they know there's a really good way to do something, that we allow them to be creative and find that way to do it, but also I don't want to tie their hands that they can't be creative and find those options, but also not force them to use those options. So I mean, to the point Director Scholl made, this is going to be a course correction. We're going to go down this road with a policy, and then we're going to be adjusting it. I mean, as we go, we're going to run into some situations. We're going to be coming back to you mid-year with, here's some data on how many phones have we confiscated and how many, issues have we had. And the number's going to be probably pretty significant, because it's going to be that first year of implementation can be a pretty big lift across our system. And so, yeah, I think I will tell you all, so after I got board feedback on the policies, then I essentially created like 3 variations of the policy. So policy A was kind of what you saw last board meeting with a few wording changes. Policy option B was essentially what you see today. And then policy C option was most extreme, like the pretty much away for the day kind of perspective. And I sent that out to all of our building principals and said, give me some feedback on these policies and how you feel like they would be implemented in your schools. I think 20 of our principals responded. 70% of them favored the policy that's in front of you today as a first step, with the understanding that there's going to be some need for some change.
Dawn?
I have a lot of concerns, and I voiced what those concerns are. I'm glad that the admins have given feedback, because I think that was a big driver in some of my concerns last time, is that we can't put something in place that we can't support, because that would be even worse than waiting to make sure we can support it. But with that said, one of the things that was a driver of some of this was that we got a form letter from a special interest group that a lot of people signed on to. And the people who have reached out with personal stories has been very few. The ones that have personal stories, though, have very meaningful personal stories, powerful, problematic personal stories. And problematic in that we already struggled to meet the needs of people who should maybe be on a 504 in art, or should be on an IEP in art, or I don't know, we could be decent humans, and when a family needs to have their phone to make coordination in emergencies, it's not I just found out that my kids don't have a ride home. We would actually have the device in the hands of a family who knows that their kids are using it responsibly and using it regularly. And so I do have concerns, because I think that the people who are most harmed by this are the ones who are using it for considerable reasons to bridge gaps. And yeah, in my perfect world, the technology a kid needs to get their education is supplied by us, but let's be real about the budgets. Let's be real about the challenges of the Chromebooks not doing something we use probably every day. I mean, like, to have our kids do video seems like a really easy, obvious thing for us to be doing all the time, right? And that's a barrier that exists that most of our teachers would probably use if it was available. And so I'm really concerned about how much this impacts our most vulnerable students, and how we've already seen there be real divides in this already. And so I am concerned. I'm also concerned about the fact that from a safety perspective, none of what we're proposing helps make it safer for incidents of violence or risks or planning, and that is something I just can't be okay with, because we can't have 30 kids using a desk phone to say, I love you, Mom, before they die. We just can't. That's not an option. And I'm not okay with the fact that we've saved lives because of who has access to technology in a situation that happens all the time. And so I know we have to start somewhere. I do appreciate that we're having the conversation. I've appreciated that we went through this spectrum. I think that that's good. Because this got tighter, I don't like it. It goes the wrong direction and hurting the people who are most vulnerable. And while it's probably going to pass, I think it's very important that we say that, because I think what we have got to do sooner rather than later, if we put this in place as written, is make sure that the people who are creating the barriers day in and day out for the things I'm concerned about are thinking about things very differently than they are today. This isn't just like, oh, these kids are on their phone because they're distracted and whatever, because that's not true for every kid. And this is a generational judgment zone. And it's, in the end, like what works for my family and what works for somebody else's family isn't the same. And I'm really concerned about the fallout that we have and how hard we've made it for people to access the tools that they need as it is. And that's why phones and devices are making up the difference. And so I realize it's a lot to solve. This is step one, but we went the wrong direction and I don't like it. And I appreciate that we had to try.
I guess for me, by making phones so taboo in schools, and saying to kids, we don't trust you, one, it's also telling, we need to control this at a time when particularly our high schoolers are trying to learn how to, be in control of themselves. I just think it's overly restrictive to say everybody's phone needs to be away all day, or because there are reasons kids need it, and they need to be learning how to use them effectively, and that can be done in the classroom. And so, I see that we have this built in there, but I don't want it to be like this is like some heavy lift that I have to go through to get to be able to use devices in my classroom. Right. I'm a teacher, so we have to trust their judgment on when it's the best tool to use as well.
Denise, I will tell you that part of the conversation around making it less restrictive during unstructured time at high school was specifically what you're talking about. These kids are all going to leave high school and go off to their workplace, to college, where they're going to have to self-manage their device usage. And so they should have those skills. I will tell you that we had a conversation around hallway, whether it should be used in the hallway or should not be used in the hallway. And I'll tell you, even for me, I said, I see too many adults even who spend their time walking down corridors with their phone in their face, not looking up. And the other concern I do have is if kids can use them in passing periods, but they have to put them away when they go into class, will there be kids who will choose to stay in the hallway longer so that they can use their phone? And we're going to see tardies increase, and we're going to see other issues. Hallway was one of the things I think I got pretty good consistent feedback from the high school principals of like, yes, in between classes, we need the kids to put their phones away. We need them to walk to and from class, get there where they need to get to, give teachers the discretion to use them for instructional purposes. But at lunchtime, before school, after school, the ability for kids to use their devices as they need to in order to either connect with family members, in order to do, they might be have to check in with their job, or they have to, who knows, all the different things that our athletes have to use their phones to look at their Sports U account to see, did practice get changed? Like all of those things happen. And so for high school kids, we felt like there was a level of maturity and discretion that was allowable during unstructured times, which is in many ways it's their time, or at least partially their time. So that was part of the discussion that kind of came up with the high school folks. Elementary and middle, talking to those principals, felt a little stronger we do need these kids just to focus on being at school and some of the behaviors they were sometimes seeing from students with cell phones was creating new challenges, and so they were more in favor of a little more restriction during unstructured times, but still across the board having some level of teacher discretion for instructional uses in the classroom and in finding ways to be creative in the classroom with those, but purely for instructional. So again, I would argue like this is not, okay, you're done with your homework, you can now scroll TikTok. That's not the idea here. It is for an explicit instructional reason, not just as a babysitter because class is, you're done with your homework for the day or whatever.
So can I bring up something there? So I have fought with a lot of teachers, some of you might even be in the room right now, because a valid IEP accommodation is having music or being able to take a screenshot or being able to and have that. And I've had teachers who have said, I don't care, it's in the IEP, you put it away anyway, right? Again, I get back to that. And so I think, you know, a bigger gulf we have to cross is our understanding of what
Sure.
an academic purpose is. Because I get why the average teacher thinks I'm ridiculous for fighting that battle.
Sure.
However, the things that my kids have done to manage stress, anxiety, to be able to access their education don't always look obvious to the adults, especially the ones who have never needed an accommodation themselves or need different ones. And so I guess that's one of the things that makes me really concerned about this, and that's the people I'm hearing from. I think that part of why I'm hearing from that group of people and not everybody is because I'm speaking personal experiences, and we've had people who clearly are not willing to understand that there is a need for these things, and it doesn't always look the same, and we're supposed to have that, but we're really far from where we need to be, and so I am still concerned about that. And so I guess the one thing that I would probably look at with this is making sure that we have some way that we've softened the conversations around, hey, I think my kid needs this.
Right.
Because right now, it is a really huge 6-month or year-long process to make that happen. And that's where we can't make that be the reality, right?
Yeah.
And like, my medical issue wouldn't be my kid's IEP, but it's still valid.
Sure.
Because then they're stranded at school without a ride, and that's still my thing, right? And so I that's part of where I think we need to add some context to this, because what I've seen is a really big lack of empathy where the walls go up high.
Yeah. And
that is a lawsuit waiting to happen, and we can't have that.
Well, and even, I mean, short of lawsuit, it's just, does that, now the student feels less welcome in that classroom or all those pieces. I think one of the reasons why I've always struggled with an out and out, like, complete ban in the classroom without any ability for it to be used for various necessary purposes is for our students who have a very specific need medically to use their device to monitor whatever it might be. So we have students with blood sugar that they are using their device for that purpose. Now that student taking out their device feels very foreign in the rest of the class. It's like, why does he get to take out his device, right? So it creates this opportunity to have to out students for whatever is, you know, potentially on their IEP or 504. And so not making it so completely foreign in the classroom that a phone could be taken out for a specific reason, I think helps to normalize it, at least for kids who have no choice, because they have to use it for a very specific academic, medical, whatever reason.
Thank you for that. I think these conversations are the important part. It's how we move it forward, is by having some level of greater understanding across the system.
I wanted to follow up, Kelly, because I saw you look a little quizzically when Dr. Goebel mentioned the video that I shared. So I just wanted to give an explanation of that, and I'm more than happy to share that with you. It just so happened that the day after that discussion, I got an email from my alumni grad school, and it was an economist who provided a very nice explanation of the Stanford study that was done, that was referenced. And it was helpful, kind of enlightening to me to kind of have, as opposed to having to read an 85-page academic paper, but I did print it and I do have it. But one of the things that he brought up, or that he discussed through the study, was in schools where they did a ban or a more restrictive ban, one of the things that occurred was a lot of friction in that first year. That there was a lot of, because kids were accustomed to using it as a time. Now, we don't have it. And so that created a set of behavior challenges that weren't otherwise, we dealt with. And they said, really, it was enlightening to me, because they said it's really there's a 3-year process, and kind of understanding, kind of as we work through it, and kids and families kind of adjust to that reality, and so I think it was really helpful for me, and I hope if you take a few minutes to kind of watch it, because I think one of the things that led me to kind of really understand is to recognize the fact that it's not a binary choice. We're not saying yes or no to cell phones. We're saying we need to think about how we, as a district, how we manage those devices in schools, and how important and how we value them. And I think thinking of it, because I feel like if we're going to start to change, well, we have to do it, because obviously the state's requiring us to, but we really need to think about a 3-year, coming back. And I do hope, I do want to ask that we have check-ins on this, because I do think it's important. I don't want to diminish Director Kirk's comments and her position on that, and that I want to make sure that we're making good policy. So.
Okay, so I have one question from Stu, and then I have a couple of my own. Stu was concerned mostly about the consistency between the different schools, and particularly the part about the high school unstructured time, where it would be everything, each of them say in accordance with individual school guidelines. And he was asking why that part needed to be in there or should be in there, rather than just having it standard across the board.
We have different support structures at every single school. We have different number of people that could help monitor what's happening, specifically in the unstructured times. So to say that it's consistently for every single high school, when some of those support structures are not always there. And I do think it's really important. That study really talked a lot about in your first year of using your community and using your teachers and your stakeholders and that feedback to make sure that they're a part of that process. So this allows for more opportunities for parents, for students, for teachers to really be involved and say, hey, this is what the reality is going to happen. Because if you don't have someone, an administrator who could help through some of those things or has an available time, that would be really rough for us to implement across.
I'll just give a couple of specific examples from my own past with this. Every high school is just different. Every school is different. They have different setups, their buildings are different, their structures are different. So give you an example, when I was a principal, one of the common areas before school that kids could choose to go until the first period began, there was a kind of a cafeteria common area, then they could go to the library, media center, they could go to the gym where we had bleachers out, so kids could sit in the bleachers, kids could also shoot baskets, whatever. All those things were happening. We had different expectations for the phone usage depending on the area they were in. For example, sitting up in the bleachers, totally fine that you had your phone in your hand. Down on the floor where basketballs are flying around, not okay for you to have your phone in your hand, because we need you to be paying attention to what's going on. Our library had a kind of a strict no device policy. So though before school in general we're saying they're allowed, there's going to be some variances based on the place in the building where the school might need to tighten it based on some specific things. And so I think as we kind of do this and as our high schools learn and kind of work through it, I think we're going to hear best practices, like what worked really well for you over here that you haven't had this issue, but where did you really struggle and how do we create more and more of that alignment? But I also worry that with every high school being different in terms of those before and after school, their lunchtime routines, being explicitly that they can be allowed anywhere could create new unintended consequences. So that was the idea.
Okay. And then my first question is, in the high school, are open blocks considered unstructured time? Or how is that?
Technically, they would be considered unstructured time because it's not a classroom period of time, yes.
Okay, and then just sort of general thoughts. I think, the elementary school part, I'm fine with that. I think middle school is gonna be rough, to say the least. And so I think it will be interesting to see. I think also a really important part of all of this is including families in the process. I think both from the get-go, communicating what the policy is very clearly and very well to people. And then I think, really important in sort of the first couple months, sort of how is this going, is getting a lot of, input from families as well, because if, that they need to be on board with it as well or not, or trying to figure out like if there are communication issues or if there are, things like that, because that is a huge part of this. And so I think both there's the, like I said last time, the policy can be the most beautiful policy in the entire world, but if the ability to implement it with fidelity or to enforce it is not there, then it's meaningless. And at the same time, if we have this that our, students' families are not going to be on board on, then it's again pretty worthless. And so I think those are important considerations as moving forward. All right. Any other closing questions, thoughts?
I think the other thing I would just add is that in the end, so much of the criticism of phones comes down to trying to address behaviors that are not 100% connected to phones.
Right.
And the Stanford study did talk about that quite a bit, about creating a vacuum actually sometimes made things worse, because we were expecting that, hey, phones are the problem, and now the things that phones were fixing is gone, and we have other things. And so I do still want to just make sure that part of what we do as we move forward with this is thinking about really decoupling that. Because unless the behavior is directly related to my hand is on the device creating this issue, which is not for 90% of what we've been told, it may have nothing to do with the device, and we're looking for the device to fix a much bigger challenge that we have, and we're gonna have that challenge. And a tool is just a tool. And so I'm grateful that we're having the conversation as well around all the ways that kids are engaging with content or disengaged from content. I do think one of my favorite things that has come out of this is the talk about the expertise, is the talk about the individualization, and where that makes this most challenging, because I think that is the secret sauce to how we get to something that's sustainable and workable and doesn't get us in trouble and doesn't cause even more issues. And that's a lot of work. You gotta start somewhere. But if we can continue to have the conversation not be around devices, but instead about the needs that the devices are covering for, or the challenges that devices are covering for, then I think we're gonna get a lot further than if we just talk about this in terms of the device, which will keep us from getting anywhere.
Just have a follow-up to that, Director brought it up too, is that, you take away the device, and then what are they doing with that time, and I guess encouraging them to, have the conversation, with, their classmates, and maybe spend some time reading or something else that's more constructive, because, living in that vacuum, as you mentioned, if you create that vacuum, they're gonna fill it with something, and I guess the cutest thing on that video was, 12-year-olds are still 12-year-olds, and they had the little boy, just being silly. So, and I guess that's a great opportunity for the educators to, to share those options and to promote things that are going to help them with their educational process, rather than, just selectively, tuning out. So, overall, so, given that little bit of direction and guidance, and then too, getting the parents on board as well with, directing them, because if they're setting down their phones but they're still not getting effective sleep or spending their time, learning, it's still not gonna be a good thing. But replacing that, like I said, 21 days to create a new habit, but the best way to change a habit is to replace a bad habit with something good.
Okay. All right, thank you, Kelly. We are at about 2 hours. Are people wanting to take a break, or are you happy to continue on?
I would like to use the bathroom.
Okay, so let's take, it's like 7:02, so let's just take like a 5-minute-ish break, and then we will carry on. All right, we will continue on. I think hopefully our heavy lifting for the night is over. Maybe, we'll see.
We'll see.
We will see. We will go to 4.9. Huh?
So I hope as well.
Okay. Thompson School District Habitat for Humanity Berthoud Elementary School Memorandum of Understanding Agreement for Shared Costs.
Nice.
Yeah, I'm glad you put all that up there. Thank you, Vice President. Yeah, tonight for review is a cost sharing agreement. We've been working with Habitat for Humanity for the last, really since the bond passed, a little bit before there was conversation, but gained traction when the bond passed. So one of the goals of the bond at Berthoud L was to separate parent traffic with bus traffic. Those don't mix well, so the goal was to separate that. Literally, you can go to the visual again.
Here?
So, yes.
Okay.
So our goal was to separate it. We had money in the budget for that. As we started the project, Habitat for Humanity was working on a small development just on the west side adjacent to our property. So as we saw that, because we get referrals on developments, so what if we cost share some of this drive and we use this for our bus loop? So in essence, that's what this is. It's a bus loop that's going to go on the west side of the softball soccer field, have its own independent sidewalk to the school. That's the blue arrows. The red arrows are where the parent drop off is going to be. So it did what we needed to in separating those two, because if you've been to Berthoud L anytime during drop off and pickup, it is fascinating, I'll say. It's, yeah, I'll leave it at that. So we worked through the cost sharing agreements. Our attorneys looked at, both attorneys looked at the agreement. The cost that we have included in this agreement is within the bond cost and budget, so it'll be part of that project cost, so it's not a general fund budget, it is part of the bond budget. So it's gone through the city. The last step is let's get through all the approvals through the city before we come here. And so for discussion tonight is this agreement.
All right. Question starting with Mike.
I just a quick question. So where is the housing going in?
So see where the square is, it says bus loop?
Yeah, is it that rectangle?
It's that rectangle right there. I think there's 8 parcels, so there's little tiny almost row homes going in.
Yeah, the habitat, eight
Yeah.
units. So are they gonna front onto the bus loop drive?
They are. So we expanded that drive out so it fits a typical 2-way traffic and then the bus loop and parking on the resident side.
So, I mean, if you're a resident there, you're gonna have to live with buses
For that 15 minutes,
15
and the
minutes
20 minutes morning.
during the morning, okay. Yeah, no, I think it's fine. So, that's all.
Okay, Lori.
Thank you for that clarification.
Don.
I'm assuming that the flow is still gonna be better than if we didn't do anything and they didn't do anything, because it's such a jumble.
Yes.
I mean, it's notorious jumble right now, right?
Yeah, and the challenge we had, if we didn't do this, if you look at the south side of the site, there's really nowhere to do this kind of adjustment. We were looking at actually cutting in the property and our side much further. So this was a good compromising win.
Okay. So it's still gonna be an improvement in every way.
Yeah, when you look at standard design of schools, you want to separate those two entities, not that they don't get along great, but it's better when they blow up the school in different locations. So yeah, the school's excited about it, so they've seen the design.
I bet the whole city's excited about this, or at least everybody on the north side of Berthoud.
Right.
Denise?
No, just create, we found a partner to work with and it's a creative way to do it.
I have one question. Is that, so where the bus loop is there any sort of existing road there right now, or that'll all be brand new?
That'll all be new. So right now, it looks like an open field.
Okay.
In the east side of that road is on our property line. So we'll be looking back, because there'll be some right-of-way dedications that legally the board has to approve, but right now they don't have those set legally. So once they get the plats done, construction drawings finalized, then they will, with the city, then they'll go through and we can do right-of-way adjustments, but.
Okay. Anything else? You guys are good? Okay, so then let's move on to 4.10, the Turner Middle School resolution authorizing the sale of real property and approving a contract.
Yes, so we, this is coming back around, and Lorelei, if you can scroll down, there's a few pieces we put in the memo that were not there last time, so there is some deed restrictions, so what we're looking at is still selling that small parcel that's around, the, track and field. The other thing we added here was the deed restrictions that are currently on that. We showed what it was in 2007 prior to purchasing that. And then in 2008-9ish, we actually flipped the field. So Lorelei, if you could go to the first drawing in a second. So you can see that's what it was prior to 07. You know, the field was right, it's really attached to the school. If you scroll down, in about 09, after the parcel was purchased from the city, the field was flipped to that north-south orientation. And then that green portion, outside of is the actual acreage that we're looking at selling. Then if you go down to the next one, the other piece we wanted to show is we did a massing model of what the projected growth is of the school. So if we add on, I believe it was 10 classrooms, auxiliary classrooms, and parking, that it could all fit without needing additional land. So this was actually done for the 2024 bond. This massing model was done. So that bottom picture there is just what the section of land for the TSD land that would be the Arboretum. There was a couple of questions from board members I received already. And one piece that I think Stu wanted to bring up was, will students have access to this? And the answer was yes. That part of this goal is to create continuity between the two sites. So from that, without going into details of deed restrictions and design, that's what they have tonight. The other thing I will mention is the city's in the middle of going through their budget allocations, so they have budget allocated for the project. Initially came in, I think, over budget, so they're working on getting it back into budget, but the money's allocated for the project. And the other thing, Director Scholl, that is in the agreement is if they do not use it for this exact intended use, then there's a reverter in the clause.
Cool.
Lori? Questions?
And maybe this is actually more of a question for our finance department. But if we're selling an asset at less than half what we paid for it, just throwing out an idea here, as far as to keep the property and lease it to the city, so we could keep that asset on our books, because selling it at less than half of what we paid for it, I don't see where that's fiscally responsible. But if we could show it as an asset on our books, that property, because nobody's gonna build on it, lease it for $1 a year for 5 years, 10 years, whatever, but still maintaining that asset, so when we're going for bonds or whatever, and just the responsibility, because is it going to be delayed until 2030? Or is, like you said, they're back to trying to get it done quicker?
They have the fund, they're working on getting back into budget, to the point that they asked, they said, you know, because we're working on this, can you bring this back forward? Because really they need to know if they need design for it or not. So if we don't do it, okay. But they need to know what we're doing, because they're spending their dollars waiting for us. So if we don't do it, that's fine. And if they don't do it, it's back to us. Yeah, so.
I would think like a lease type of thing would be beneficial to Bill. They wouldn't have to outlay any capital for it. We could keep it on our books to, and not sell it for that loss, because like I said, I think that just looks very, very bad as far as any, you know, financial fiduciary responsibility to the taxpayer, since we did purchase that money, or that land. And then they would maintain it, you know, and have it be a beautiful piece of property still be a beautiful piece of property next to the track.
Yeah, that's definitely an option, yeah. We did that with the Loveland Sports, the Loveland Field and South Loveland High. It's a multi-year lease. So it's an option.
Okay, thank you. Don?
Yeah,
Denise?
I'm good.
Mike?
Yeah, thank you for the, I mean, I appreciate you looking at the reverter clause and different things. I'm not, in terms of the sale, you know, when I looked at that parcel, I mean, there's a number of challenges if we were to look at it like from a development perspective. I mean, one of which it has a pretty, there's a deed restriction on the property already, the Wagner Farm piece, that would prohibit doing any kind of intensive development. I mean, it was handed over, and so it limits the value of the property. And I guess what I'm getting at is I could see in some instances where doing a land lease would make sense. I don't know that in this instance it would make a lot of sense, even because that asset is not, because of the fact that you know, you're valued on and its potential, and there's not really a potential to develop it as anything other than community use or park, then it's not really, you're holding on to, it's a keepsake that's only valuable to your you know, and I guess a little bit. So I don't know how, I'd be curious if you have information that would be different, if you think that's a viable option, but I'm not sure that I would see that. The follow-up question to that is, so we will get $100,000, which is, you know, it's not an insignificant sum, but I mean, in terms of our overall budget, it's not huge either. And would it be worthwhile? Because I do think you know, looking at the vision that the town is putting forth, it's really cool. I really applaud, I think, the town. It's a really neat park, you know, in land that probably would otherwise just be plopped a lot of tract housing on otherwise. So I give them a lot of credit for what they're doing, and I wonder if we have the $100,000, could we allocate some of that money to kind of build in connectivity with the school into, like, for our portion, so that there's connectivity from, you know, allocated. I know with budgeting, but I mean, my thought is it's going to go into the ether of our budget, and could we make sure that there's access points, or use some of it to supplement, so that the park becomes a extension of the school.
Yes, and that's part of their goal of wanting to finish design, is they need to know if we're going to be a part of this, where do we want access points, the trail coming in. There's restrictions on the dollars, so because it was bought with, you know, it goes back into the PILO account, so it's not just a general fund, so it does go back into that account, so it can't be used just for, it has to go into that to be used for the other infrastructure needs throughout the district. So if there's other things within this project and or the site, you know, we could use that for. But no, the town, they're pretty excited, and it's an option, so that's why it's in front of us. And we can make more connections, is to ask for our kids to use it and be part of our, kind of part of our grounds.
Yeah, cool.
My only question was about why sell it if they're not proceeding with the Arboretum project? It sounds like, sorry, it sounds like they are.
Yeah, there was, complicated.
Okay. Anything else?
And again, I just want to mention, if they don't, it just
Come back.
Is there a time limit on that? Like the,
No, well, it's more their time limit than ours, so I don't know, I don't know their time limit, I don't know.
But would we then, sorry, I apologize, then if, with a reverter though, do we put the money in, because we would pay them back what they pay to us if the reverter kicks in? So,
As it's written now, yes, because it's a permitted use in the language, so yes.
so then would we have to put that, would it matter? I'm not trying to complicate things, but would we then put the money in escrow?
I think we could figure out whether it's escrow or whether we kind of constrain the funds until we know they're going forward, then we can do something, yeah.
Cool. Sorry.
okay. Thank you. 4.11, 26-27 school calendar revision with Tiffany.
Good evening, Tiffany Rogers, Chief Human Resources Officer, Dr. Miller, Dr. Lesson, members of the board. I'm here to talk about the calendar revisions for the 26-27 school year. You'll see the calendar. One thing I do want to highlight, I guess the exciting part of the calendar is it is accessible. So we did convert the calendar to a new accessible format. I have to thank Matt Beal, actually, in the communications area. He has spent countless hours working on getting all that wording and script accessible and icons, and to actually make it look like it is still viewable and readable to all individuals. So he has spent countless hours on that, and we're super appreciative of that. We're working on transitioning that for the Ferguson calendar is that way, and then we're also working on our work calendars and things like that as well. So in that transition process, so I thank him for his work on that. The revision to the calendar actually comes from the furlough days. That is the component that is impacting the calendar. The reduction of one instructional day is causing the calendar revision. So what was the last day of school as a half day on May 28th in 2027 will be, the last day of school will be May 27th at a half day, leading to one less instructional day. In addition, I think one piece of this too is just the calendar changes that I want to point out. We did have to institute furlough days as a mechanism for cost control and this season. And so the one piece of that is just, as we talk about the furlough days in general, the impact it has on our staff. I cited that in the board memo, as well as the impact that it could have on attracting and retaining talent within our district. Any questions you guys have about that?
Dawn, we'll start with you.
No changes, thank you. I'm glad it's accessible.
Denise?
Yeah, nice work, thank you.
Mike?
Okay.
Lori? Can you just remind us what the furlough days are? I know it's
The furlough
August.
days are, I didn't have the furlough days in front of me. It is the 4th of January,
Sorry. One is August 17th,
See, it's our
right?
day and tens week.
August 14th,
August
August 14th, January 4th, March 4th, and the last day of school.
Okay, alright, thank you.
Sorry, too many calendars we've been looking at lately for the schedule, I'm like, what days are what? Sorry about that.
Okay. And then the 4.12, the Ferguson High School calendar variance, is that you as well or not?
Yep.
Okay.
While Jason's making his way up here, I just want to say one thing. This furlough thing, first of all, the thing nobody enjoys. Like we all wish it wasn't this situation. But I have to give a ton of credit to the HR team and a number of other folks. We have something like 40 different employment calendars, like as a district, 40 different calendars depending on the number of days you work and whether you're certified with your. So they had to go through each and every one of those and figure out which of the 4 days could actually work on each of those calendars. Significant lift. At one point, Tiffany's office was literally wallpapered with all the different calendars as they worked through this. So just a ton of thanks to that team, not just Tiffany, but her whole team that kind of worked through a lot of complications around making that unfortunate thing that we had to go through work. So thanks.
Thank you. And nobody wanted my wallpaper. I tried to produce it, nobody was interested in purchasing it, so. So I'd like to introduce Dr. Jason Germain. He is here as part of the Ferguson calendar variance, and I'm gonna let him lead us off with just talking about why there is a variance for Ferguson High School.
Absolutely. Vice President Lessem, Dr. Heller, members of the board, Jason Germain, Principal of Ferguson High School and Thompson Career Campus. I'm going to take you on a real quick 3-minute journey through teacher work days, start of school, end of school, graduation, conferences, all of that fun stuff. But before we get there, I want to take a moment and remind you of the mission of Ferguson High School, which is really centered on creating alternative experiences for students that are different and not less. And so the core of this presentation is highlighting one mechanism in which we are different, but certainly not less in what we provide for students. So go ahead, Laura Lee, if you don't mind. Relevant board policy, ICA, which gets a school year, school calendar, instruction time. I'm not going to read that to you. But when you look at some of the core differences that we have at Ferguson High School, one really has to do with the students we serve. And so 97% of our students, if memory serves me right, are at risk of not graduating on time. That's a renewal we do for the state every year in late February, early March. And with that status of being at risk comes challenges that don't always come in a timely fashion. They don't wait until the summer to happen. And so we do our best to respond to those, provide additional support. But one of the mechanisms that alternative high schools have used over the course of time is shortening the grading windows that lead to high school credit to remove the magnitude of the impact of some of those barriers. And so Ferguson has, in my 10 years there, we've had 6-week grading periods called Hexters. We switched to quarters sometime around 2018, if my memory serves me right. And the reason for the switch to quarters at that time was because when you're on a 6-week grading cycle, you're always stopping or starting, and you're never really getting deep into curriculum. And that was apparent in our test scores, our student experience, what our teachers were feeling in the classrooms. And so switching to quarters, I would argue as principal, has been very positive. So to make that happen, the structural changes that I'll highlight for you tonight are August 19th, the first day of school is shared with other high school students. The key difference that you're looking at is that we have all of our students grades 9 through 12. It's not just a transition day for us. The reason for that is being on quarters, we have less instructional days in the fall semester, and the fall semester is used for funding, amongst other important things when you look at schools operationally. And so having all of our students that day was critically important. Running on a quarter system, conferences, we felt it was very important to have that touch point with our families 4 times a year instead of just twice. So the traditional high schools do conferences usually first or second week of October, first week of March, mid-semester. And so we do conferences for a shorter amount of time, but we do it 4 times a year, once mid-quarter in the fall. The first quarter conference date is usually mid-September, the second one just before Thanksgiving, and then the 2 in the spring are mid-February and mid-April. So that's conferences. The same pattern will play out for the 27-28 school year as well. Teacher work days, it's important for teachers to have time to wrap up grading and that type of thing before each grading period, and grades are due. So you'll notice we have a teacher work day at the end of each quarter. So again, that's mid-October. That's right at the end of school in December before winter break, again before spring break, and again the last day of the year. The benefit to having the workday in December is that if we have enough graduates who finish, there have been times in the past where we're able to host a winter graduation in addition to a spring graduation, which for our amazing dignitaries who come and support us can create a less extensive or shorter experience in May. But it also takes a critical mass of students who are ready at that point to pull off an event like that twice a year. So we haven't been doing that as regularly since the pandemic, but we like having that work day in December to facilitate that if the need arises. Let's see, the other thing out there, graduation, one of the impacts of the 4th furlough day will be that that furlough day happens on the day that we have historically graduated, that Friday. So working with human resources as well as the operations team, we would move our graduation from Friday to Thursday to align still with our teacher work day. In terms of impact on teachers and that type of thing, our teachers overall report on the same day. They have the same last day of their school year as well. Our numbers for credit and funding have been approved numerous times this year as we've been working through different calendar things. Students' full-time funding is 6 out of 8 periods, which is no change from 2 years ago when we were last here asking you to approve our quarter system. And we do issue credit each quarter, not at the semester. Questions?
Denise?
No questions.
Mike?
Yeah, nothing for me.
Lord? Dawn?
Well, I'll worry about Thursday graduation.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm worried, like, that it's such a big deal to our families, and it is a day that they're getting off early. I mean, I understand the need for it, I just feel like we're gonna have to communicate that way more than we would the Friday graduation, because there's so many of those families who may not be able to just take the time off, or if they realize it close to the date. And so that's the only thing that I think we're gonna have to prepare our families for. I realize that most of them are so excited that they will do just about anything to be there, but logistically, it can be a bigger challenge than that. And so I think as long as the school is prepared to kind of make sure that everybody doesn't assume it's on Friday, we'll be okay.
I concur. I think Thursday is different than a Friday. However, one of the things that we moved 5 or 6 years ago is having our scholarship or graduate awards on the same day as graduation, so the families only had to take 1 day off from work. And so we will continue with that same practice here, albeit a Thursday, not a Friday.
Okay, I don't have anything, so thank you.
You're welcome.
The other piece of this that is not on the agenda for this evening that I'll be bringing to the actual board meeting in 2 weeks is that we have discovered through the furlough process that we have impacted our early childhood group, and so we will need to do an early childhood calendar variance as well, because we were short one instructional day. So we have resolved that. So right now it is being worked through. We partnered with TEA and worked through that with Lamb. Lamb was not able to stay this evening. He has the conference in Denver, but we worked through that process to talk about where we're going to put that instructional day back in. And he's working with his teachers at his school currently to determine what day that will look like. But we're adding 1 day in that was a planned day back in as a student contact day. So I'll be bringing that as well as part of this piece.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. I think you are free to go. 413, 2026-27 employee contract approval.
So in terms of contracts, we are just requesting the rollover creation of the contracts for the 26-27 school year, and so if the board signs off on those, we will begin the process of contract creation with the effective dates typically run between July 1st and August 19th, 2026. And that's when a majority of our contracts begin. Obviously, we have contracts that begin throughout the year if we hire replacement positions, things like that. But there's contracts now that will be, there's a process of rolling those over prior to their effective dates. And so that's just what this piece asks for, is the approval to move forward with that.
Mike, any questions? Lori? Dawn? Denise? The only question I have is I don't feel like we've done this before. So I'm curious why.
So yes,
we
we have in the past, we've done it for our probationary teachers. And in conversation with our legal counsel at Kaplan and Ernest, it was recommended because you guys are signing off on signatures are on there that we talk about this process. I talk about that we're going through the rollover process. So this is new, but there was a small chunk that we did in the past.
Yeah, so only
So-
probationary would happen in the past. Really should be doing it for all of those contracted positions, so it just wasn't being done, now it will be.
Yep.
So,
I think, I also feel like we talked about it as part of the negotiations package on the years where they weren't changing the
maybe-
things, then it was like, it's all one, because we're not changing that language. I think that's also how we currently.
And we have the individuals have contracts, so we have licensed, we have our APT, our contracts that we'd be moving over from one year to the next.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and then, thank you. And then we go to 414, which is our 2026-27 Board of Education calendar adjustment.
Yep. Essentially, it's an adjustment that essentially are two board meetings, the regular board meetings that have been regularly held at Berthoud High School in the auditorium will now be moved back to this building. Just to be, the auditorium at Berthoud High is not an ADA accessible site. So for us to have regular board meetings in a place that not all of our public stakeholders can attend needs to change. I think we've had some conversations that regular board meetings really should be here, where we have all the technology available to us to present, to record, to live stream, to do all the things that we can do. Study sessions could still be held in school sites, again, so long as those sites are accessible. Doesn't mean we couldn't have something at Berthoud High, but the auditorium is not an option. There's other places, especially for a study session, that could be appropriate at Berthoud High that have accessibility, but the auditorium is not, and so we will no longer be holding our regular meetings there. That's our recommendation moving forward.
Questions starting with Lori?
I've been getting a lot of comments about having our study sessions actually, say here, or even, where we're each individual microphone, because the microphones just pick up so much back noise, and it is extremely hard for people watching remotely or watching it on replay, watching it at a later date, for them to even, and I communicated with Dr. Heller about this, and just the ease for IT, and once again, then you're not dealing with the accessibility. I would be all about, and I know part of the reason of going to the schools is because of the school presentations, maybe doing that at a different time, where the board makes a trip to, to the individual schools for that purpose, and because I know that the kids really, really enjoy that, and it gives us a chance to maybe actually get to tour. I know the school tours were a great thing as well. So I would like to see that change for relatively soon, just because of, once again, more for the transparency and the accessibility for people watching remotely.
Sure.
It's really difficult when you have the multi-directional microphones that, and I know there's really nothing you can do.
Yeah, the
I know
school sites are
some-
limited in terms of the technology and the multimedia and all of that, so it certainly can create some challenges, and he tries as hard as he can to make it
Yeah.
work. But I would say maybe it's a good conversation for us to have at the board retreat to discuss future study sessions at school sites versus all being held here. It might be a good board retreat conversation later this summer, early fall.
So, you know, the calendar would have to be amended.
We'd have to
again
change that
because
again.
I just added all the schools to it.
Yes.
I probably should want to include wallpaper.
Yeah.
All right, Dawn.
So one of the reasons I think it is important that we're going to the schools is to highlight what became highlighted because we are doing this. We have families who can't go to the play and they don't know until they get there, or they can't go to the whatever. And part of the challenge when we meet in just this room, even if the kids come to us, which I know they actually enjoy most of the time too. So for the kids, it's less of a concern. It's that we don't all and can't all go to the things at the individual schools.
Right.
We just can't.
Right.
And I know that that's not going to change with our board makeup anytime soon. And so our ability to actually get to see these challenges in real life and go, oh, okay, this is not just a little thing, it really has an impact. It means that people can't access. It shines a light on something that we are challenged to fix. But at the same time, I really think that, so I'm on board with this. I think having things in Berthoud where they're accessible is ideal. And I think the same is true for us thinking that through with all of our other sites, thinking those adjustments through, because not all the schools know how to do that. They're not thinking about that for the program. They're already busy trying to do it for the program. And it is sometimes because we're disruptive by our very nature that we highlight that in a way that it gets absorbed and offset to families. And so I do think that there's some real value in us getting around the district. And then ideally, having the funds and ability to really solve this. And that's where the rubber hits the road on that. But I think the challenge is that if we, like our families can't not go to Berthoud High, right? We can. It's one night every semester for us. That's not a big deal. But our families don't have that option.
Right.
It's I miss
If that's
out.
where their kid is performing in the play, then that's the only option they have.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and so I appreciate this as a way to shine the light on what it really feels like for everybody who's actually impacted day in and day out, for what it's worth.
Denise?
Yeah, no comment.
Mike?
Nothing for me.
I would just say that I hope we, get to a point where we can go back to having some of the meetings in Berthoud. I think, Berthoud already feels sort of like the little stepchild. And so I think ways to incorporate, make sure that it's included is important. But I'm okay with this for the time being. All right. So then let's move on to 4.15, the standard action consent items. There's just the personnel one and then the contract skater and then $50,000. Does anybody have any questions or comments on either of those? Dawn, starting with you. Denise?
No question.
Mike? Lori? No? Okay. Very good. So we made it through section 4. We now move to section 5, which is the updates. There's 5.1, which is the legislative update. Which Stu had sent out his little written report, and he had said to me there wasn't really anything terribly particular that he wanted to highlight on there. Just wanted to encourage you all to read it and reach out if you had questions. And then, Mike, do you have anything as far as a Loveland Urban Renewal Authority update?
I'll be really brief. We're meeting quarterly, and at the last meeting, they've just been going through the findings, not the audit, but the findings. And there was not sufficient support to go forward with a much broader audit of the finances. So that's still kind of an open question. I think it'll get addressed at the fall meeting. The one other thing that I wanted to bring up is I had asked that they put an amendment in the bylaws that allows for an entity, the non-city entity that's a tax representative, to be represented as either the chair or the co-chair. So one of the two positions will always be a non-city entity, which was passed. I think because the school, I think whoever is in this seat that I'm in next time will most likely be the co-chair of the Urban Renewal Board. So just so anticipate when we go back through our board selections and stuff. So other than that, there's nothing really more to report.
Okay. All right. And then item 6, future topic items for board consideration. Anybody, I guess it would be Denise's turn to start. Do you have anything?
I do not.
Mike?
I am gonna say I still would like to have a conversation about putting something on the ballot in the fall. I know, Bob, we talked about at least there's a opportunity to do a mill levy for technology purchase, for capital purchase is a possibility, but I know I might be out on an island a little bit for that one. But I still would like to have a discussion. I mean, at least depending on where we land with the statewide measures and stuff.
Yeah.
Lori?
No, I appreciate Dr. Heller having sent out the request form for what we would like to see upcoming, so
Yeah.
I just filled that in.
Yeah, if you haven't filled out that like future items for agenda topics form that I sent you, please do, because then I'm going to try to gather your feedback on all of those topics and we can discuss them further at the retreat and hopefully at least build out the first semester list of kind of topics that aren't on the typical agenda, so we have that planned for the fall. So.
Done. Okay, then I think we are at number 7, which is adjournment. So we will adjourn.